Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the October Autoimmune Registry Leadership Webinar Series, where we bring together the great leadership and minds in the autoimmune community to share their insights, inspirations, and guidance about expanding information in the autoimmune community. My name is Reggie Barnes. I'm the Director of Patient Partnership for the Autoimmune Registry. And we have the great luxury of having the T1D Exchange and their CEO, Dave Walton. Dave has been leading T1D since 2019. He has 30 years of leadership experience in the healthcare community. He has experience in bringing conceptual ideas into reality. Uh, T1D Exchange is dedicated to facilitating the research and driving improvements in care and outcome for people with type 1 diabetes. Uh, with that, I would like to turn it over to Dave. Dave, it's all yours.
All right, Reggie, thank you. And good to be here. We often get so focused on just our disease area, type 1 diabetes. We don't always think about the broader landscape of autoimmune diseases as a whole, of which we're one of the larger ones, but not obviously the only one or the largest one. So good to be here and share a little bit about our organization, some of the different focus areas that we have, that some might be common and some are probably a little unique. But as you mentioned, we are a nonprofit. We have a very data-centric approach to our work. We gather and analyze real-world data. We work collaboratively with the different stakeholders, but particularly healthcare providers and people with diabetes. And really, our goal is we want to improve outcomes, and as part of that, accelerating impactful research through a couple of different ways is also, our approach to the work that we do. So I will briefly go over some of the areas, listed here that kind of make up the full set of services that we offer at T1D Exchange. And I'd also, point out I've worked in the type 1 diabetes arena for about 20 years. I've lived with it for 30 years. And after joining the board of T1D Exchange in 2018, ended up, moving full time as the CEO. And it's been a very interesting and different experience from my days in medical devices and pharmaceuticals and consulting, which is where I spent most of my career. So the first major area, it's our highest kind of priority area of our work, is running a quality improvement collaborative, which is something that not everyone has had experience with. But it really is a unique kind of organization. We work with 63 endocrinology centers currently around the US, oftentimes at large academic medical centers. And our approach is to work with electronic medical record data that they provide to us, and work collaboratively with using quality improvement methodology to identify and kind of attack different areas in order to improve outcomes. And I'll talk a little bit about what that is, but there's a heavy data gathering and measurement component, and then there's a roll up the sleeves kind of test and try new methods of providing care that can result in benefits for people with diabetes. So there are 63, and there are pediatric and adult centers, and we treat those differently. They often have different leadership, sometimes even different medical record software, which is becoming less common, but we do have a couple of those situations. But we're spread around the US, and we will probably be expanding to about 70 in the next couple of years, filling in a couple of geographic gaps and getting some more adult centers to round out. Type 1 diabetes affects almost 2 million people in the US, and about 85% of those are adults, but roughly 50-50 in terms of diagnosis occurring in children versus adults, but there's been a kind of an uptick in more adults being diagnosed. And in 1996, I was 24 in graduate school. It was deemed to be very uncommon to be diagnosed in your 20s with type 1. Now it's very, it's common. So this collaborative, really, it's helping and collaborating with some really excellent providers at a lot of different organizations to help guide them or support them or facilitate knowledge sharing um, in order to improve outcomes. And in type 1 diabetes, blood sugar control is kind of the goal. You want to keep your blood sugar as regulated as possible. The autoimmune reaction is, the body attacks the islet cells that make the insulin. And so, as a result, you're not able to produce your own insulin. You need to take it, externally. And it's very challenging to balance kind of the food, the exercise, and activity, and try to dose appropriately. So, there are a number of people, that are not kind of getting to the blood sugar control that, we all like to see, given the potential for complications and things over the course of your life. So we really want to try and get that blood sugar in good control so that people can live, as normal a life as possible. And, again, our approach, very data centric. We have a portal that we allow centers to benchmark and see, are they prescribing devices to the same degree as other providers at other centers around the US in our collaborative? Are they seeing the same kind of control? Are they seeing any disparities in care? We have a lot of variables of data that we analyze, and we have some visualization through this benchmarking portal as one example of things that we do. But I won't go into the nitty-gritty of the interventions and the framework we use to test interventions and that these centers do, on a daily basis in order to affect change. But it's a methodical process, and it does get results. A lot of jargon here, but to give an example of kind of a project and how we use quality improvement, AID stands for automated insulin delivery, and that's really, becoming the standard for helping to control people's blood sugar, where an insulin pump will automate the insulin that is being delivered based off a sensor that's giving continuous glucose data, typically via Bluetooth to the insulin pump. And it's lots of evidence showing, this really gives you the best control, and particularly overnight when you're sleeping. It's very common for people to wake up with, near perfect blood sugar every day when using an AID system. And so we looked at some data to say, well, if people start AID at different time points after they've been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, is there any difference in that blood sugar control? The HbA1c is kind of the bellwether metric that gets used, and 6.5 to 7% is kind of the target. And what you'll see, in this curve is when people are diagnosed, typically their blood sugar has been high for a while, and so their A1C is at the higher level here. You'll see a 10.5%. And then as they initiate insulin, you see that drop and getting down to, let's say, closer to normal range there, A1C below 7 or right around 7. But the body's still making a little insulin, but the body's continuing to attack. And so you get to 6 to 12 months, and generally you're really not making insulin at all, or just a very tiny amount. So, but what we saw was people that started it earlier ended up having a steeper drop and a better sustained blood sugar on average if they initiated early. And so this was some data we saw, which then fed us this project to say, well, let's try and get more people to initiate that AID system sooner. And so we're working with 12 centers, or even more, but on some core QI work, adult and pediatric endocrinology centers to see how soon we can do that and what kind of changes need to be made, process and policy changes at these centers in order to get people on it, because there oftentimes are barriers to that. So that's just an example of a QI project that we might do where it's informed by data. We then work on various interventions to try and affect a change, and we then measure that and see did we get an impact. We we often work not just to do a project, but then to get that information out to other people. And so we generate a lot of publications, 30 in 2024, from the collaborative and the work that we do with them, uh, and over 100, in the past 5 years. And it ranges a lot of different topics. Um, and I think we're pretty proud of the fact as well that it's not just getting an overall average result, but can we make sure that everybody is benefiting from it? So if we're going to try to promote the use of advanced technology and diabetes devices, do we see that occurring in equal amounts by race and ethnicity, by public and private insurance, et cetera? So we've done a lot of work in that arena as well. And we measure that and we can benchmark on that. And we've shown how we can close the gap in utilization of devices and certain outcome measures like that HbA1c. So that A1C, one of the things that people who work in the type 1 space certainly are familiar with is, the teen years and early 20s are challenging. When you think about growth hormones and change, maybe a little teen rebellion on top of that, it's very hard to keep, blood sugar and, at that, target amount when you're dealing with all the things that come with, that stage of life. And so it's common to see higher A1Cs in those time periods. And then over time, people start to, stabilize as, older adults. And, but what we've been able to show with our data is for a variety of reasons, a lot of technology use and better understanding and care being provided across the US, we've seen a reduction by age, from about almost 10 years ago or, 8, 9 years ago until now, where we've dropped that average A1C for the population. And it's not easy to move big populations, in big ways here, but we're proud of the fact that, the centers we work with have, reduced the average A1C in their populations. And it's now around 8%, which still there's work to do, no doubt, but we certainly are pleased to see that that change has occurred. And again, a number of reasons, a number of providers, patients, companies, insurance changes, a lot of things contribute to that, but we try to play our part to make that happen. And then one more kind of interesting or unique thing we do, we pull together people from all of these centers across the US once a year to an in-person annual learning session, as we term it. And we rotate cities, but this year's in Atlanta in November during World Diabetes Week. And there's a lot of knowledge sharing. We have people prepare posters like a scientific conference would have. And there we have lectures, oral presentations, and then a lot of networking and collaborating takes place during those couple of days. And the abstracts that are submitted by the participants and some of our own staff as well, do end up getting published out there. And again, our goal is we want to spread knowledge in different ways. And so spread it amongst the people and the centers within the collaborative, and then spread it, to others who we might not, partner with. And that'll be a big focus for us the next few years, is how do we get to other places, other sites of care, other large health systems, where people are being seen for their type 1, But we've started with the endocrinology centers that have the concentration of patients so we could get to as many people quickly and demonstrate some impact there. So, this learning session, we have sponsorship for that specific meeting, and we're thankful for that. And that's something that we're gearing up for now. So that's our largest kind of focus area. I'll now just hit on a little more briefly some of the other areas. So custom research is a broad term. We do a range of kind of outcomes research, market research, uh, using some of our in-house talent, and then also partnering with other organizations or sponsors, and it could be industry or academia. Um, and so we can do everything from designing, implementing, recruiting for a particular piece of research. And the work that we do spans a lot of different areas. And so we could work with a medical affairs department at a company or a commercial team or a health economics and outcomes research team. It really, depends on what the needs are and what kind of questions they're trying to answer, what kind of gaps in knowledge that could support their work. And, our view is, outcomes improve with better tools and technologies. So if we can help companies that are developing that, um, understand unmet need better, figure out how to make their product target addressing that unmet need better, that's a win. And, I've been on the other side at those companies, looking for data to help inform how we might change our product. And so I try to use that perspective at times as we're thinking about opportunities and talking to companies and bridging that, that need with the kind of approach to the research. So again, a range of things that we can do. On the data analysis side of things, I'll get into this in a little bit, but uh, we've begun doing a lot of continuous glucose monitoring analysis. That's the CGM. That's a sensor that is continuously worn by the majority of people with type 1 now. And electronic medical record data analysis. That electronic medical record data I mentioned we gather from the centers. There's a lot of interesting relationships there, and it wouldn't be a good presentation if I didn't talk about AI at some point. But we certainly are looking at some machine learning models and things to identify insights in areas that maybe we weren't aware of previously, where predictors of people that might have an adverse outcome or certain relationship of variables that might explain why some people are doing better than others. And so those are things that we're trying to leverage this big pool of data. And we have EMR data on about 73,000 uh, people with type 1. And there's a lot of power in that. And so we're very focused on trying to advance that work. I won't go through all of this. The point being, like, we do research in different areas, and um, it could be patient use experience. It could be about low blood sugar that people have. It could be about awareness of things. It could be about complications or issues people have, or how are people out in the real world doing with hitting guideline targets for kidney function, liver function, lipid management, some of the things that are important. And we've got interesting kind of insight now into pools of data about people and how they're doing. And with our questionnaires and device data that we gather directly from patients that I'll talk about in a minute, there's some interesting things there. Okay, so the term registry used differently by different people. Technically, we have two different registries, so to speak. I mentioned the electronic medical record data, and that is, a registry. Uh, but now I'm going to talk about a separate one that we go directly to people living with type 1 or their caregivers, if they're children, uh, in order to get people to consent and participate in an online registry so that we can uh, gather data from them. We can reach back out to them for different research opportunities, et cetera. So that's our online um, registry that started in this form in 2019 with a couple thousand people, and we're now at almost 24,000, and 4,500 of them have connected their continuous glucose monitoring data via the cloud, and we have access to that data. So literally, it could be a couple of years of data from every 5 minutes, their glucose, how it's moving over time. And there are a lot of interesting things that can be gleaned from the pattern analysis, from looking at the percent of time they spend within a target range, below range with low blood sugar, or above the range with high blood sugar. So uh, definitely some compelling research possibilities. And so we use that for certain projects. Um, one company has a novel technology that uh, will essentially you can implant islet cells that will make insulin and manufactured islet cells. They're studying this right now, and it's towards the end of a clinical study. And they wanted to understand how often people were having low blood sugar out in the real world, because the documentation in the electronic medical record didn't show it being that as common as they believed it was. Well, we went directly to people and looked at their devices, 2,000 surveys, and 1,000 of those who shared their device data with us. And we were able to see people who were in quote unquote pretty good control, how often they were having low blood sugar and severe low blood sugar. And it was a lot more than I think we expected and realized. And that work was published in one of the diabetes care journals, which some of the most widely read. So we're proud of that. And we gather a lot of different data. It's really a 15 to 20-minute survey that we ask each year that gives us just a baseline understanding. But really, it's starting from there. We often then go into a deep dive on a particular topic. And then we might, depending on what someone wants to look for. And we ask people to self-report comorbid conditions and complications. And we have specific ones listed on autoimmune. There are more than this. But I think, in terms of the more common, um, it's not terribly different than I know research that Aaron has done and others have done, where you see psoriasis and rheumatoid arthritis and thyroid disease, whether it's Graves or Hashimoto disease in that top five. Um, Celiac, we have over 5% of our people reporting it, and there's a strong relationship between celiac and type 1. And we've talked to some people in other organizations who manage a registry or have an advocacy group focused in a particular area. I think it's something we'd like to do a little more of on the collaborative side. And certainly, I think look for opportunities where there could be some unique things with, these combinations. Um, and then lastly, just on the things that we offer, we do have just a straightforward, simple online community that people provide an email address or they follow us on social media. We use this more for people who want to stay in touch. They may not be interested in joining an online registry or thinking about it, but this is a quick stay in touch with some things. We send out a lot of our research opportunities to this broader online community as well. We do send out a question of the day every day and have for like 11 years, I think, 10, 11 years, and we have all those responses. Uh, and so it's not um, kind of uber scientific, kind of research approach. It's more, let's get a pulse check on a particular topic. And, we get those, a couple hundred responses every day from people, and we, vary the questions and whatnot. And people can submit question ideas to us, so can organizations. And so that's something that, again, it helps keep people connected, but it allows us to go out to them and say, hey, would you be interested in participating in this? during COVID, we did some interesting telemedicine surveys and other virtual research, and the online community and our online registry, we were really able to kind of tap into that. And so lastly, the study recruitment, uh, I mentioned having connections to lots of people with type 1 diabetes. We want to try to bring research opportunities to them and kind of serve it up and not make people have to do the work to find out about a particular study that could be relevant for them. And some won't. But certainly there might be, some that really do resonate. And so a lot of them are surveys, but there are clinical studies and or in-home studies that we help recruit for, and we can speed up the recruitment of basically any study. And if a clinical study is being done at certain centers, we have zip code analysis that we can do, and we can feed people to those centers, even if they don't get their normal, regular care at that center. So, I mean, that's something that, I think we've been able to, really, accelerate the pace, of research. And um, it's another area where we try to break down barriers or kind of the common way of doing things. Um, some early on, some centers were a little resistant to have outside patients come to their center for a study. And I think once they realized that there's nothing, different, and this can really help. Let's advance the study more quickly so these products can get in the hands of people instead of just being in the study environment. So that's been a big focus area as well. And we work with academic centers, universities, anyone across the country. Only some of these are part of our quality improvement collaborative. A lot of these are just researchers who are trying to find type 1 people living with type 1, and they realize, wow, that this is a fast way to get it done. So we've had a range of different research that we've done more recently with the academic centers. And then in terms of with companies, we've worked with a lot of really interesting things in the type 1 space. And this is one of the more exciting parts of the job, to be around this kind of innovation and see what is coming down the pipe, what they're trying to accomplish and what might be the challenges in getting people into a study. So we can try to help with that. Um, and one of the interesting things, on one of these here is that diagnosing type 1 and type 2 diabetes um, is not as flawlessly executed as you might think or hope in 2025. A lot of adults who are diagnosed ultimately with type 1 are misdiagnosed initially with type 2 diabetes and put on a medication that is not going to get the job done. And so we've done research on this. We have a grant application in with somebody to run an algorithm on this where you can find people more likely to be type 1 after being diagnosed as type 2. And so we're trying to, we're hopeful that we can, work on that project as well, because we shouldn't have the level of misdiagnosis that's going on right now. It's just not acceptable. So we partner with nonprofits. Our key funder, who's funded us from the beginning, the Helmsley Charitable Trust, they have been unbelievable to the whole type 1 diabetes world. The amount of funding they put forth every year is really remarkable. And we would never have been able to build what we've built without their steadfast funding. And we just kicked off a new 3-year grant period with them, with some slightly new focus areas, and we're excited about that. Breakthrough T1D, another big partner, it used to be called the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. They renamed, but they are an important funder of research, and we collaborate on research areas that we both have feel is important and needs to be addressed, and then a number of other organizations as well in the space. And then we've worked in the last year, we've worked with companies who've either sponsored the summit that we put on each year, or have commissioned us to do some specific research. Um, and so, we're always looking to work with others, and there are a few more that we'd like to see go on this list. But the good news is there's a lot of innovation going on right now in type 1 diabetes, much more so than I think there was, 10, 15 years ago. And so it's an exciting time to be involved in the space. So with that, I will close. Uh, T1DExchange.org for any more information. We've got, uh, you can sign up for the online registry there, or just get connected to the online community, or read about our publications, the work that we do. We try to profile it for people so they understand, kind of the impact that we could have.
Wonderful presentation, Dave. At this time, before we jump into the questions, I would like to introduce our Executive Director for the Autoimmune Registry and founder, Aaron Aben.
Thanks, Reggie. And Dave, that was fantastic. You covered so much ground. The beginning, really, I kind of want to go back to where you started, because what it shows is how you're able to actually impact lives today. You've got 100 papers or whatever it was, 100 plus papers published in the last 5 years, but the work you're doing isn't waiting for that kind of research to have an impact. You're having an impact today, especially just looking at how you've raised everybody's level. The people getting the worst care are always the people that are in trouble, and you're making sure that those groups are being having same access to high quality treatments. Just amazing. So people have questions. We'll go right to those questions. I have some of my own, but there was one question in the chat from Katie.
Yes.
Do you want us to read it out, or do you want to ask it?
I can ask it. I was wondering, when you said AID, how closed of a closed loop is that?
Yeah.
Because there's definitely variability.
Yes, no, there is variability. If both the automated insulin delivery, I think, as we've categorized it, almost all of the AID use is something that will suspend insulin or will give additional insulin depending on the reading. How it does that, like some of the products do it slightly differently. And, I know there's on the very edge of things, we've got very small number of people doing the fully automated, never have to enter a dose into their pump ever. There are those people that loop, you might know, but the majority of people that are using AID are using the commercially available systems of, Tandem, Medtronic, or Omnipod. And so, those all have a good degree of automation, but people are still interacting once in a while with it. I've worn one for a number of years, and I still am putting in a number of, kind of doses to accommodate the meal that I'm eating, and I get great results from the product. But yeah, it's not fully 100% closed loop. It's semi closed loop or hybrid closed loop.
And then can I just add, I really like the average HbA1c graphs, because that made me feel normal. And it mirrors my experience. And I think that as a patient individually in the office, the doctor's always like, you can do better, you could do better. But this showed that I was about average. So I think that graph should be more widely available.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a wide range of how people do. And there are even things, I mean, we could get into a lot of particulars, like the A1C is not the perfect measurement. Um, it's known that African Americans read 0.3 to 0.4% higher on that A1C. So if you're trying to get people to 7, or if you're a health plan or health system looking to get X% of people below a threshold, and the measurement of A1C in and of itself has some bias in it that reads higher, you can just that's like one of a number of issues that exist with that metric. So, there are other things, other targets that obviously we're looking at now, like the percent of time that you're spending within a certain range in the moment, that is the reading you see on your continuous glucose monitor or blood glucose monitor. And that movement is happening, and people are pushing to get these time and range metrics used more widely. And they're probably a little more, they give you more context and more information. But yeah, I think we don't know the exact number. Like, we obviously have a big database, but we don't account for 100% of the population. We're literally, the EMR data we have is probably 4% of the US population of type 1. And the A1C being 8% is very good. I think the national average is higher than that, from different data sets I've seen before. But we want to get to a point where we can project and we can work with others and share our data to figure out what can we get a better read on what the true national A1C distribution is, and look at the things that can help with that, like the amount of device use people have and certain medications and so forth. GLP-1 use, another hot topic for a lot of people in this country for a lot of reasons. It's not indicated for people with type 1 diabetes, despite the fact it has incredible benefits. There are two studies going on in type 1s, at least, by companies. And so it'll be very welcomed when that comes, because people are seeing amazing blood sugar control, and other kind of health metrics, improving. And that's something that we certainly hope, occurs soon.
Great. Beth, you also have a question? Beth, no,
Beth is posting.
Hi.
okay.
I was just wondering if there's any way for the average diabetic to attach their CGM to the exchange so that you can get the data and use the data. And then I also asked if GLP-1s are being considered for slim T1Ds.
Yeah, so I know, like, we've seen in some of the studies, well, on the GLP-1 question, I know that the BMI cutoff is I don't think it's set at what would qualify as slim. I think there's still, it's either 30 or maybe there's one that went down to 27. But I think as more and more information gets out and real world data gets out demonstrating how well people are doing, we have done a little bit. We know we have 7 or 8% of our people are using a GLP-1 and getting very good results. So, we do some analysis and look at if we have the CGM data and the GLP-1 information, like, we can show some, I think, some interesting information there. In terms of connecting devices, so if the best way is, if somebody has diabetes, to join our online registry, which is literally just you go online and you say, yes, I will be a part of the registry. We protect all the data and we have all the information in there on the informed consent. But it's a 15-minute survey, and then to connect your data, your CGM data, it's takes about a minute or two. We work right now just with Dexcom, and it walks you through how to just enter your username and password and connect your cloud account of Dexcom to us. And that's what we have with the 4500. We're doing a pilot right now, or starting one with Abbott Libre. And we also talked to Tidepool, a nonprofit in the data downloading and connectivity space, about ways that we could be working together too to do more of that. So that's, maybe down the line.
That's great because I've been a T1D an exchange member for quite a long time, but I didn't know I could connect my sensor, so that's amazing.
Yep. Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Dave, are you able to connect EHR data to participants in the registry who've provided patient-reported data?
Yeah. So we started a pilot with a small company, and after we did some development work and got ready to start the pilot, their private equity owners changed their strategy, and they said they wouldn't be doing it commercially. So we said, well, then why would we do the pilot? So we backed out of that. But there are some companies and approaches to how they're trying to make that easier for people to do, to control their data and to share it with trusted partners. And so we are still contemplating that. But right now, we don't have that uh, working currently, but we are definitely on the lookout for it and monitoring, some of these solutions. And if there's a easy to use one where people could link like their My Chart, from Epic, to us, um, that would be great, but not yet.
Do you have any sense of how patients, participants feel about it? Are they very interested in doing that, or is it something they're reluctant to do?
I mean, I would say I haven't asked the question explicitly to a large group. Uh, I think you'll have the range of there are some people that are always a little nervous about their EMR or their
Yeah.
insurance claims, like will that data be protected and will it be used? We never share our data outside and certainly not identified. Um, we'll share results of data analysis that we've done, but we don't export or share, our data to others to use. So when we've done things like link our data to we have done a project where you can de-identify your data and mask it, but then they have a way of determining, tokenizing it and linking it with other sources. We did do that for one project. Now we had consent from patients to connect to other sources as long as we protected their identity, which we do. And we had to go through a process to validate that we weren't um, identifying people. Um, and we were able to do really some interesting analysis on like lipid control. And so
Hmm.
our online registry people have, above average kind of glucose control compared to the rest of the population, but their lipids, their LDL readings are just, similar to the rest of the population in the US. Um, I think actually when you have diabetes, they want your LDL below like 70, and I think like 18 or 20% of our people hit that,
Yeah.
whereas a large percentage are hitting the glucose target on average. So a lot of people with type 1 were focused on blood sugar, blood sugar, blood sugar. And as you get older, you realize, oh, cholesterol and other things, matter. So cardiovascular care is getting a lot more visibility, which is why, again, the GLP-1s were interested in that because there are benefits that, you know, we shouldn't get excluded. People who are type 2 or obese get additional benefits, but like type 1s get some of the blood sugar control benefit and not spiking after meals, which is a bigger issue for type 1s than it is for type 2s.
Dave, I have a question. You said that there's a delay in identifying type 1 diabetic patients. Uh, would tests that measure, say, GD65, would that help speed it up? Or what can you give examples of trying to identify type 1
Yeah,
diabetes patients?
yeah. Well, so in general, there's a lot of activity now around actually trying to identify people before they get to the point where they've destroyed the majority, if not all, of their islet cells that make insulin. So there is screening that can be done to detect autoantibodies. Um, and there's a lot of work, and we're doing some work in that area. We're working with 4 of our centers right now on screening immediate relatives of people with type 1 and other pockets. So, as an example, I think it's like a 3 to 4% risk of someone with type 1, immediate relative of someone with type 1, having type 1 or developing it. So, that's like the target rich environment you would go to first. But then autoimmune conditions, there's a higher rate, and like celiac disease as an example. But so we have some centers where they're trying to screen people and see if they have the autoantibodies. Because if you find it that, hey, here's someone who's very likely to develop type 1 in a number of years, there's now a biologic that can be administered through an infusion that can delay that ultimate onset of type 1 by a few years. So we are doing work to help get more people screened. And a lot of organizations are. Based on this product. And now that's the first time you've had something that kind of modifies the course of the disease and you can delay it. And there are others coming down the pipe as well. You then have the situation, okay, now they get diagnosed. And if you have a couple of these autoantibodies and your A1C is 6.5% or higher, you're type 1, you'll be diagnosed with type 1. But a lot of places don't run autoantibody tests or test for your C-peptide, which is like a marker of how much insulin you're producing. So you get people that come in and an ER or a doctor might test the blood sugar and then just make an assumption, oh, it looks like you're a type 2. They might run an A1C, but they don't know if you are type 1 or type 2 unless they do the autoantibody testing or the C-peptide testing to see what's happened. I play basketball every weekend. 2 guys, one in his 20s, one in his 30s, both got diagnosed with type 1, and one they thought it was a flu or something else, which is understandable. So he wasn't misdiagnosed with type 2, but they did send him home and then he came back. The other one was diagnosed with type 2, given a metformin pill, which doesn't do very much for type 1, and sent home. And he was bad for like a week and then came back. And in both cases, a few months prior, each had COVID. And, there's a thought that the inflammation from COVID, that inflammatory response, might trigger what you were predisposed to do, which is have the autoimmune attack on your cell. So, so there's a lot of effort and focus now looking at how do we identify if people have these autoantibodies. And so instead of doing a blood test, instead of drawing blood, people are looking at just doing there's like a finger stick dried blood spot test that can be done. And then someone else has a saliva genetic risk score test that you can do first and figure out if you are very likely to have it. Then you can go do that. So different stages on how you could go about screening people, but you got to get people in to screen and you got to get their attention. And so I think you have to start with the type 1 relatives and the autoimmune people first. And let's try to get as much penetration there and then spread to the general population at some point.
Dave, you talked about the recruitment support that you're doing for clinical trials. We've tried doing some of that recruitment, and we've discovered people that don't have a lot of good days are often very reluctant to use those good days to go get poked and prodded. What's been your experience in terms of trying to get people? What has worked to get people to participate in clinical trials?
Yeah. So I think, number one, and I don't know if this is terribly different from other autoimmune conditions, but we've been able to really tap into the fact that, a lot of people, even if some of the metrics say they're doing pretty well, it's still such a burden and hassle every day that people are still looking for more. And then for the people who aren't doing as well with the blood sugar and have all of that burden and on top of it, like there still is unmet need and some motivation. But I think we've done a good job at spoon feeding people. We did this for the first time like 5 years ago, right after COVID. A novel biologic couldn't recruit for a phase 2 study, and we just tried to reach out and we wrote about the study and we got some people in the Boston area to go go into this one place right after they opened up, and we got good results. We have tried and experimented and honed our skills multiple ways over the years. So we know how to go more broadly, not just go to what we already had information on. We send the outreach on studies now, like people have gotten used to it, and we're a trusted partner. They know like we're going to summarize something and it's easy to read, and um, that kind of has helped with some people. And we say, hey, do you or someone you know? And often
Yeah.
someone knows a couple people or might have a relative, so they may not be interested or what have you, but they go, so and so has nighttime hypoglycemia. They might, maybe they let me, and they forward the email on to them. So there's that. And we've also done things like we'll also, for a sponsor, do like a hosted study page where with a digital screener so that we can do some of that upfront work for them and
Yeah.
feed them better targets. And they love that instead of getting you know, for a clinical research coordinator at a center to get all these calls from people that don't qualify. That's not the best use of time for everyone either for the person or for the coordinator. So we try to dispense with a lot of that and really give them targets, give people highly likely to at least qualify. Then, they still may not want to do it if it's a burdensome study, but um, people I would also say, these aren't huge studies that we recruit for. It's not like 5,000 person
Yeah.
studies. These are usually a couple hundred people. Um, so we can make a meaningful impact.
Other questions out there? I can keep going. Oh, Katie.
Sorry, I have two questions and they're not really related. One is about what have you seen in the field in terms of looping and adding glucose or glucagon to the pump to help with low blood sugars? Because I can have no insulin on board and my basal rate cut off and still get a low blood sugar. So I just didn't know if there's been any work in that area, if you've seen any work in that area.
Well, I mean, obviously there are, well, not obviously, but there are a couple companies that have talked about and the interest in putting a stable glucagon into an automated insulin delivery system, and they are working on that, right? Beta Bionics as an example. But I think what's probably more common, and again, I don't do this or I'm not recommending it, but just there are people that will microdose with a pen, glucagon, um, from one of the companies that I've heard anecdotally, uh, you know, is helpful, but that's not an automated, sustainable approach. But I think for people like who have issues with exercise where they constantly go low, I know some people that said they just do a little microdose of glucagon. The sad thing is most people don't have glucagon on hand. I mean, insulin is a drug that can kill people, and we self-manage ourselves 24/7. Um, Yet, the best counteracting medication for that is glucagon, and the overwhelming majority of people do not have a prescription. We actually looked at some data at one point, like people that had an ER visit yet didn't leave with a prescription for glucagon, and they had a severe hypoglycemic episode and were hospitalized. Like, I would just say that particularly in the adult world, the glucagon on hand is not where it should be. But it would be more impactful if it were integrated in. And again, the major variable holding that back has been having a glucagon that's stable at room temperature for X period of time. And, but they're working on that as I understand it. I just don't know much more than that.
And then my other question was related to Aaron's question about recruiting for clinical trials. Diabetes obviously has many comorbid conditions. How do you design trials that allow the people that have comorbid conditions to still participate?
Yeah. Well, first I should say we don't design the clinical studies. Like we get the protocol from the company. And then we kind of use that as a gauge of like how difficult will it be to recruit, because we can at least go to our data and understand, roughly speaking, uh, here are the estimates for what percent of people have XYZ. So if they have exclusion criteria, we know that. So like we don't control that aspect of it. But you know, sometimes it's not the company doing it either. It's the FDA. So it really depends. But I think there's been a little positive movement in that. Like, I think in general they're broadening out studies and not just doing well, if their blood A1C is between this tight range, 7 to 10%, and they do this, that, and the other, they can qualify for the study. I've seen some more the broader targets now than maybe what they used to, but I'm not an expert on that side of things.
Good. Let's get one more quick question in from Kalina Warren.
Yes, good morning. And David, thank you so much for your very informative and inspirational talk. So I represent the National Adrenal Diseases Foundation. I would be very interested if your registry has patients that have adrenal insufficiency, primary adrenal insufficiency, or Addison disease.
I'm sure.
Yes, I think we do have some information on that. And I can take that as a follow-up to confirm. Because sometimes even in like the other category, I just showed other, but we have it. But I think we actually may have Addison's as a specific checkbox for people to report. We don't put the entire list of things. We have kind of a subset that we think are more likely. And so, but I'll check on that. And if we do, I'm certainly happy to, explore, hey, can we help fill yours? I've talked to Beyond Celiac. We did a little data or co-promotion on trying to share about each other's work in the past. I think that's something that all, we nonprofits can help with, and we're a little bit bigger, so even if it's a small percentage, it might be a decent number of people that we could share information.
I'd
That'd
be
be
happy to help with
fantastic.
that if I can.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
Dave,
for
that was amazing.
everyone,
Thank you very much.
for
Go ahead, Reggie.
attending. Want to be conscious of everyone's time and schedule. Aaron, any words before we wrap up?
No, just thanks. Just great presentation.
Yeah.
Dave,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
participating.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Okay. The
All right.
presentation will be online.
Yes.